I'm Leandra Letterman,
And I'm Allison Christians.
and it's time to break into tax. We are very pleased to have here with us today Richard Zuckerman, the former head of the Department of Justice Tax Division. Mr. Zuckerman joined the Tax Division in December 2017 as the Principal Deputy Assistant Attorney General, where he was head of the Tax Division. Previously, he was in private practice for many years, and he began his legal career as a trial attorney with the Justice Department's Organized Crime and Racketeering section in the Detroit Strike Force. We're very pleased to have him here with us today on Break Into Tax. This video is one in a series. It focuses on how a U.S. federal criminal tax case arises. It starts with some general statistics about the overall caseload, both civil and criminal, at the U.S. Department of Justice Tax Division.
At any one time, depending on how you define a case, we have 20,000 cases. Cases are handled by the geographic sections.
Can you talk a little bit about how a criminal tax case arises? The IRS role, DOJ role, et cetera.
There are myriad ways a tax case can get started. It can be an audit, and those kind of referrals are down over the last number of years. But there's audit, there's suspicious activity reports, there are whistleblowers, and those are basically the three. So the IRS gets involved and they get a lead, and they pull returns and they take a look at the tax profile, and they look at the allegation, they look at the filings, and they then determine whether that particular case is worth pursuing. And then what they'll do is they'll either come to us for search warrants, be it for premises or electronic data, or they won't come to us right away for search warrants because we have to approve those. The IRS cannot do that themselves. But what the IRS can do is the IRS can go out and interview people, and the IRS can issue summonses for documents, and the IRS can do all of that on its own. Now, if the IRS doesn't come to us for search warrants, be it for electronic data or premises, we won't know about that case because there are post-Watergate statutes that put a wall between the Department of Justice and the IRS, and we're not permitted to know what they're doing until they refer the case to us. So the IRS can go out and build a case and decide that it's worthy, and let's say they decide to refer the case to the department, or they have to refer it to the department. We may look at it and decide that it isn't worthy yet. And so the IRS has to do more investigating, or they have to do a follow-up interview. And maybe in conjunction with that, or because we don't think their processes are efficient enough, we would authorize a grand jury. And then the matter would go to a grand jury. The grand jury would be run by a tax division lawyer. And then the grand jury would seek documents or testimony, and the case would be put together. And then once the case is put together, it would be reviewed by an assistant section chief. And then it would be reviewed by a section chief. And then if the case was put together well enough so that the section wanted to indict, then there would be an indictment review. And I've sat through a couple of these. They're interesting, where it's like moot courting the lawyers that have the case, and they're peppered with questions. And while they're being peppered, the form indictment is in front of all the attendees. So you really get to see, not only their theory of the case, but how they articulate it in an indictment. And then you start peppering them with questions about evidence. Do you have this? Do you have that? Is this witness going to live? And what happens if he dies? And those kind of things. And then if the case is approved for indictment, either by an assistant section chief or section chief or myself, then the case is indicted. And then it runs, into the general federal criminal system. So that's our case. It's a shorthand, but I think I've touched all the bases. I don't want to age myself, but I was around working for the Department of Justice when the Watergate statutes were passed, and it was extraordinarily bizarre. They were either effective January 1st of 76 or 77. I can't remember which, but the strike force concept was group participation. We had agents from all of the agencies were attached to the strike force, and we would then have group meetings to discuss the best way to handle the mafia in the particular city that we were in. I used to meet regularly with the IRS because I had a knack for tax cases, and you find out that agencies refer you cases once you win one. If you win a case, the agency wants to send you all their cases. So we got a call from the IRS, and we knew too that these statutes were going into effect, and the IRS came over to us in November of December of say 76 and gave us a complete dump of everything they had and all the advice they needed, because effective January 1st, we couldn't talk to them. We couldn't talk to them until they put a case together and referred it to us. Now, without getting into the politics, the IRS, you know, they like to hold on to their cases and handle them what's called administratively, where the investigation is done through summons and through interviews, because once they refer the case to the Department of Justice, they lose control. And nobody likes to lose control. But in order to utilize a grand jury and the grand jury subpoena powers, you have to refer the case to us. But it was a pretty bizarre experience to all of a sudden not being able to talk to the agents that needed your advice.
Yeah, I can imagine. You talked about the process regarding deciding whether to indict. Do you have any general statistics on what % of the cases actually proceed to an indictment?
I don't have them off the top of my head, but the IRS and the department likes to say that 95 plus or minus % of cases that are indicted wind up with either a conviction at trial or a guilty plea. And that's part of the IRS's public relations campaign, because the IRS, you know, could use a couple of thousand extra agents, but strategically looking at industries or groups of people and being successful in publicizing them is in and of itself a great factor in deterrence. I will say that if a case comes over to us, I would say a great deal of them are going to be indicted, because the IRS has worked them up to a great degree and we may only refine them. And the cases also go to the U.S. Attorney's Office too. They don't all come to us, and they too will work a case up. So if the IRS has put a case together and has made a referral, they've done a substantial amount of excellent work. And so there's a case there, and I would imagine a great percentage is going to wind up being indicted. And of those indicted, there's a 95% conviction or plea rate.
Impressive, very impressive.
Well, that's the idea. You know, we're involved in a lot of cases where there's also a parallel Title 18 case being handled by the FBI. A lot of times you kind of know that there's a tax case there, but there's not a Title 18 case there. And in a lot of instances, it's the tax case that winds up being the prosecutorial case. And as I tell audiences on occasion when it's appropriate, everybody's involved in the tax system, whether you like it or not. The IRS is very, very capable and knows where the abuses are. Sometimes it's a function of manpower, but they know where the abuses are. The advice I give clients is don't play roulette. Don't decide, you know, you're going to be the one taxpayer that the IRS doesn't find.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
This was fabulous.
Very nice, and thank you for having me.
This is just part of the interview that we did with Richard Zuckerman. Stay with us and watch the next video in the playlist. Thank you for joining us as we break into tax.